Whenever the university makes a decision about a community member, whether as a result of a disclosure or a complaint, that decision must be fair. This video examines what we mean by that. From the earliest age, children are attuned to the concept of fairness, the notion that, in a just world, people should be treated without favoritism or discrimination. Fairness in an administrative process is, according to legal scholar Karen Busby, a term of art in law, requiring flexibility and attention to the context at hand. Rather than fixed procedures, it is a principle-based approach that ensures that the parties' individual circumstances and the context in which the decision is made form part of the totality of circumstances a decision maker takes into account. This helps us to humanize bureaucracy for those who must navigate it by encouraging rules, processes, and decisions that support the diversity and multiplicity of contexts, experiences, and perspectives. This is especially true in a university, where diversity is celebrated and where the multiplicity of perspectives and experiences sustains our vibrant and supportive learning environment. It is not uncommon to interpret fairness to mean treating everyone the same, regardless of their circumstances. Unfortunately, that only deepens inequalities. In other words, treating everyone the same actually undermines fairness. In this adaptation of the fairness triangle created by the Office of the Student Ombuds, fairness involves three aspects: relational, procedural, and substantive. But each of these rests on a foundation of equity. Given its centrality, we'll talk about equitable fairness first. It is not enough to focus solely on procedures to ensure fairness, without consideration of power structures and intersecting forms of discrimination that are baked into our systems. Decision makers and others involved at all stages of a complaint process are expected to keep equity at the top of mind and apply an intersectional lens to their work, recognizing that individuals may be affected in different ways, both by their experience of the incident, but also by their experience of interacting with the university processes and employees. In applying an equity lens, a decision maker takes into account systemic inequities, for example, barriers an individual faces as a result of their social locations, and the needs of the individuals involved. Some questions regarding the equitable fairness of a decision include: were systemic inequities that affect the parties factored in the decision? Was the process inclusive? Were the parties' needs accounted for? Was the social background, social location of the participants, such as class, ethnicity, gender, and so on, factored in? Were issues of power or marginalization considered? Relational fairness is about how a person is treated in a process. The expectation is that every participant is treated with dignity and respect. When applying relational fairness, decision makers and others involved acknowledge that university processes are stressful and distressing and, when not approached with care, can cause harm to those involved. Relational fairness means keeping in mind that those using and participating in our processes are human. It means taking steps to reduce the harm of what can feel like a dehumanizing experience at every decision point, including interim measures, complaint intake, investigation, findings, outcomes, and appeals. Relational fairness involves honesty, transparency, and forthrightness in our interactions with the parties, and it requires that we respect their privacy. It should also include making ourselves approachable rather than being intimidating. Finally, it's important to recognize that we are all human, and we can all make mistakes. Relational fairness calls on us to own our missteps and errors, be accountable, apologize, and do our best to make it right. In our sexual and gender-based violence policy, relational fairness also includes trauma-informed practice and a survivor-driven approach. Some relational fairness questions include: was the process confidential? Were all the individuals involved treated with respect and dignity? Was the information presented to the parties in a way they were able to understand? If a mistake was made, was it acknowledged and, where possible, rectified? Did the parties feel heard? Procedural fairness, also often referred to as due process or natural justice, is the type of fairness we most commonly hear about in university complaint processes. It is about the process leading to a decision. It consists of the elements of a process a decision maker must use when their decision affects an individual's rights, privileges, or interests. The basic procedural rights to be met are the right to the opportunity to respond and the right to an impartial decision maker. These rights bring about procedures such as reasonable disclosure of the case to be met, timely notice, including advisors or representatives, written reasons for a decision, and various other procedural safeguards. Some procedural fairness questions include things like: were the parties provided with sufficient information to understand the allegations and implications of the decision? Were they provided with sufficient opportunity to communicate their perspective to the decision maker? Did the decision maker actually listen and consider their perspective? Was the decision maker impartial and free from conflict? Was the decision provided within a reasonable time? Did the decision maker provide reasons for the decision? Procedural fairness rights are flexible. For decisions in which the impact on the parties is considerable, there will be more stringent procedural protections. Most people understand that a person who has been alleged to have engaged in misconduct has procedural fairness rights, and this is true. However, in an administrative system like the University of Alberta's, the complainant is also affected by the decision and therefore is also entitled to procedural fairness rights. Finally, substantive fairness is about the decision itself. It relates to the appropriate application of the relevant policy and/or collective agreements, the reasonableness and appropriateness of the finding, and the consideration of the parties' individual circumstances to reach a fair outcome. Questions relating to substantive fairness include: did the decision maker have the authority to make the decision they did? Was the appropriate policy applied correctly? Was it based on relevant and credible information and evidence? Was the outcome reasonable and justifiable? Was it proportionate and relevant to the issue it was trying to remedy? In summary, a fair decision includes relational, procedural, and substantive fairness built on a foundation of equitable fairness. For more information on fairness, you can contact the Office of the Student Ombuds.